for someone listening that wants to get into that daily, shipping of code, but maybe they're saying to themselves, it seems so far away, or I don't know if it's worth it. Like, what are the tips?
I empathize for starters, right? I've been in those shoes and I've had conversations with engineers where I'm all gung ho about it, but there's a lot of trepidation because the difference between here and there can be substantial. It can take time. So, tips are, for starters, I'm a big believer in the general ethos of if it hurts, do it more, right? Things that are painful for the organization, the only way to make it less painful is to do it more and automate, right? As I was just talking about, releasing used to take hours and be high risk, and now it's basically free. So tips for the organization, I think talking about as a culture internally within your engineering team about the idea of if it hurts, we need to do it more. Let's lean into the things that are difficult for us so that they become easy. That concept, I think, is very, very powerful. And I encourage, other engineering leaders that aren't already thinking about it to think about that. The other thing I would really strongly think about and consider is time horizons. This transformation does not have to happen in a week, right? This could be a 12-month process.
I don't think it can happen in a week for most. It's like not even feasible.
Yeah. So this is your Horizon 2, Horizon 3, your mid long-term strategy to get there. For us, the prerequisites, a lot of technical prerequisites, even before we change the process. And so there's a roadmap, in this quarter, we're going to tackle these tech prerequisites, and next quarter, we're going to do these. Our culture and process specifically set a time for what we call innovation sprints, where we have, a little bit more freedom from the roadmap to make these kinds of investments. Now, if your organization doesn't necessarily have that and you're, strictly sprint to sprint to sprint, then you need to argue with the stakeholders that make that prioritization that these sorts of investments will unlock productivity and velocity down.
Yeah.
And that is a very, feel free to call me as a witness to that ROI. But yeah, think about it as a medium or a long-term initiative. If you go to your engineering manager or to your team and say, we're going to do this week, I think everybody's just going to be overwhelmed with the size of that task. It's not a doable thing, as you said.
Yeah.
In most cases. But over
you'll get a ton of pushback. I mean, I think what's probably hard is I'm wondering if when you're doing this change, do you have engineers coming to you? Like, what do they say? Like, do some say, we can't do this? Or do others say, we can totally do this? Or like, what is the range that you're getting?
I think the number one anxiety is we're going to break it everyone, right? That, we're going to ship stuff that isn't well tested enough, or we have this extensive QA flow that there's no time to do that QA flow. Right. And I think the answer to that is you need to rethink a couple of things about how quality assurance is done. I'm a big proponent. If you're going to be doing daily releases, you probably want feature branch environments to test individual features separate from the main code base. That way, everybody has a really clean, easy, predictable way to test something as close to production as possible without being production. So you can have that confidence that when it's merged, things will go well. Yeah. And that requires, again, more DevOps investment to make something like that a reality. But there's a lot of tools nowadays that make it a lot easier. So the other thing I would say is when you move to something that looks like more continuous deployment, there will be pain, right? There will be a couple of mornings where at 8 o'clock in the morning, the code goes out and there's a new bug and there has to be an emergency rollback. Right?
Yeah.
And so making sure those procedures are in place, that about those kinds of problems, you can roll back in, a couple of minutes. Generally speaking, a couple of oops here and there is not ending for the business and is a reasonable tax. I don't want to speak for everybody's business. In many cases, that might not be okay. But in most cases, a bug that goes out for an hour is not the end of the world. But the team gets better at it, right? These kinds of things do go down over time. The product I was talking about earlier that moved to, from weekly to continuous deployment, I don't think we've ever had a release where, major issues happen that we need to do a dramatic rollback. Certainly not, maybe one or two in the first couple of weeks, but since then it's been okay. And you'd be surprised how if you're making small changes and you're following general best practices, and of course you're writing tests and you're doing all the other healthy, responsible things in the code base, teams do get better at it and it does tend to work out.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then you got to revisit some of those ones.